Squirtle Master Kenobi. I typically haven't been doing Pokemon videos, but I also try to do some Star Wars videos every once in a while. I think the last Star Wars video that I did was honestly probably a Force Awakens predictions video. But what I've been wanting to do lately is do a couple different things. One is to do like a Star Wars rankings video. Another one is to actually do a sort of like breakdown series of all of the movies and kind of maybe give some different perspectives on different things about each one of the movies, and hopefully and maybe give some of my points of view of why I thought something wasn't good or didn't work and what maybe it could have worked instead. And of course, comment your thoughts below of what you think I say. If you don't agree, you agree, whatever it is. I like to just open up the forum for discussion on Star Wars. I like to talk about Star Wars, and I'm sure a lot of us here do. That's why there's so many YouTube videos. But for this series, I'm sorry I'm being a little long-winded, but for this series, that's what my goal is to do, is for us to talk about each one of the Star Wars films in its entirety, break it down into the different acts and sections of each film, and then suggest maybe ways in which it could have been different, and ways in which it succeeds perhaps, or maybe we wouldn't need to fix it. So for this first film, as the title suggests, we're going to be going over The Phantom Menace. And so without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. So for the first part, we're going to go over the prologue aspect, the prologue portion of the movie. Of course, as we all know, every Star Wars movie starts with a little opening crawl. And a lot of people have had misgivings about this crawl because they felt like it was bogged down with a lot of jargon. And all about tax federation and different things like that. And they didn't feel like it lent itself, didn't really open us up into a good storyline, a good mindset for this story. Before we really get into the crawl, I would like to talk about the title of the film, The Phantom Menace, which I think really is an appropriate title for a first episode. Particularly for the first episode of this specific trilogy, because in this trilogy, what we are discussing is the Chosen One, right? Darth Vader's history as Anakin Skywalker, how he becomes a Jedi and how he becomes Darth Vader. That's the whole point of this first trilogy. The core conflict is this Phantom Menace and who it ends up being. And I don't think I'm going to talk about it too much right this second. But I just want to put that nugget out there so that when we get to a later portion of the video or videos, that we can maybe readdress that as the title of The Phantom Menace. Now, going on to the opening crawl for Phantom Menace. I mean, if we just read it, we could just read a little bit. Turmoil has engulfed the Galactic Republic. The taxation of trade routes and outlying star systems is in dispute. Hoping to resolve the matter with blockade of deadly battleships, the greedy Trade Federation has stopped all shipping to the small planet of Naboo. While the Congress of the Republic endlessly debates the alarming chain of events, the Supreme Chancellor has secretly dispatched 2 Jedi Knights, the guardians of peace and justice, to the galaxy to settle the conflict. Now, this is the whole prologue. This sets up the entirety of the prologue, which I have dubbed the I think I said the negotiations were short. As a reference to Obi-Wan's line, "You were right about one thing, Master. The negotiations were short." So I actually really, really like this crawl. I think that even though it has the Trade Federation taxation, and it has some big words that maybe not a lot of kids would understand, and admittedly so, I didn't fully understand either when I was 7 and I first saw it in theaters back in 1999. But as an adult watching this film, or as an older person, even in high school and junior high, when I had a little more understanding of, basic economics and the government and stuff like that, I actually feel that this crawl really perfectly paints a picture of what's happening. There's a group of individuals that wants they want power they want to control the galaxy, essentially. That is what I gather from it. And one thing that they're doing is that they're enslaving the people of Naboo by putting a heavy tax on them. And in order to help Naboo, the Senate of the Republic has sent 2 Jedi Knights of the Order to try to negotiate some dealings to help get rid of this taxation federation. And the 2 Jedi Knights being Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi, they go on this mission to try to discuss with what are their names? Newt Gunray and his buddy. If there was something we could work out about trying to free the slaves. But of course, Newt Gunray and the Federation are not really willing to talk. So instead, they just send a bunch of battle droids at them, and they try to poison them and kill them instead of even talking to them or giving them a chance to explain the situation or anything. And I think it's a good little setup to kind of put our heroes in a situation where they were supposed to do something that failed, so now they have to go on to plan B. And this whole thing takes place on the Blockade Federation. And, talking about a few things, Ewan McGregor and Liam Neeson worked really well together. I thought that their on-screen chemistry was really well done. I thought that the graphics and the CGI for the battle droids was really cool. I actually really think the design for the battle droids is really cool. I loved the droidicas, the destroyer droids with the shield generators. I liked the introduction of a new force ability, that being force speed. I liked the outfits that they put the Jedi in, because even Obi-Wan Kenobi's outfit in A New Hope that we saw, and Luke's outfits that we saw him in Return of the Jedi, they didn't really look anything like those two outfits. And so it was really interesting to kind of get a little bit of more of a glance at this look of the Jedi with the tunics and the boots and the robes, and then, the 2 famously colored lightsaber colors that Luke had, green one and a blue one. So we had 2 Jedis. And the aliens that were in charge, Newt Gunray and his people, they were an interesting looking species, and I kind of like the design of them, and I enjoyed the voice that they gave the character. I liked the banter between Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi, where he says his line that I said earlier, "You were right about one thing, Master. The negotiations were short." And then one thing that I did think was an issue was that bleeding from this point into the into Act 1, which is essentially the whole Naboo sequence where they rescue the Queen and all that. They didn't really explain very well, I didn't feel, that Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi were going to be sneaking onto transports and then going down to Naboo. At least for a long time as a kid, I didn't get that. I don't think I understood that until I played the Phantom Menace video game, and that was like the mission that you had to do at that point, was sneak on a transport. But overall, I think it was a pretty strong beginning. Even with that little blowing up the the ship at the very beginning when they're like, oh, these are 2 Jedi Knights that they've sent, and we're not going to talk to them, so we're going to blow up their ship, and then we're going to kill them. I just think it was a really strong opening for what I feel is actually one of the strongest Star Wars films, but I know a lot of people disagree with me on that. Now, moving on to the next part, Act 1, Rescuing the Queen. So, as stated before, Obi-Wan Kenobi and Qui-Gon Jinn snuck onto a battle droid transport and rode with them down to Naboo. Because at this point, the Federation was seeking to actually go capture the Queen and her people and basically put them in little concentration camps or something. And they were kind of capturing the castle and capturing the people. So Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan land on Naboo, and straight away, I actually think that Naboo is a very beautiful looking planet. I think the design of the planet's really cool. I love the Theed Palace. I love the Otogongo underwater city, and I think that's a really cool concept. I think the idea of the Gungan aliens was a really cool concept. Yes, Jar Jar Binks himself was not a great character, but the Gungans were a great species, and they were a cool design. I think that in regards to Jar Jar Binks, this would be one of my very first fixes of Phantom Menace. And it wouldn't necessarily be to get rid of Jar Jar Binks altogether, as much as it would be to maybe change him to being more of maybe like a Robin Hood type of a character, where he maybe is a lost prince or a lost son of a earl or something in Otogongo. That maybe Boss Nass's character is like the Steward of Gondor's kind of a character, where he was like taking over while the king, after the king had, gone, and like how Aragorn had to come back and take the throne back from the steward. And so maybe you could have had something like that with Jar Jar Binks' arc throughout this film, where he was like dethroned by Boss Nass, and actually one of the things that they had to do, and that was why he was going to go to prison when they go back, and why he couldn't return, was that if he returned, he would be sent to prison. And of course, Qui-Gon Jinn was able to do his whole Jedi mind trick thing and convince Boss Nass to let Jar Jar Binks come with them. And then that whole storyline of Jar Jar Binks being, say, a lost prince or something to that effect, or a Robin Hood type of a personality, could play into later on when they go back to Naboo in the third act. But moving along, they run into Jar Jar Binks. Jar Jar Binks says, I know of an underwater city that can keep us safe from the droids, and he takes them there. But they are not allowed to stay, but they're given transport to flee to the city of Theed, where the rest of this scenario plays out, of Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan having their second lightsaber battle, which I think is a little cooler of one. So far, there's been 2 lightsaber battles in this movie. The first one was on the Federation ship when they were being assassinated, and the second one is when they're rescuing Queen Amidala, who is played by Natalie Portman. And I think actually she does a very good job in the second 2 films, but don't think she's as strong in this first film. Granted, she was only 15 when they filmed it. But I think her character makes a lot of cool choices in it. One of those choices being, she disguises herself for a long time with one of her handmaidens. And we'll get to that later. But basically, Qui-Gon Jinn, Obi-Wan, and Jar Jar Binks rescue the Queen and her people, and fight through some battle droids, and end up commandeering one of the starships, one of the Queen's starships. And their plan is to take her back to Coruscant so she can talk to the Senate and see about getting help from the Republic army, which I don't think at this point was very big, because I think that was the whole point of the clone army for the Clone Wars. But I don't know, I could be wrong. And so, but what happens is, as they're trying to flee, they are under attack from the Federation ship, and their hyperdrive ends up getting before that we learn that much, they take a bunch of hits, and they send about a bunch of astromechs out to fix. And I really actually think this is a really cool introduction for R2-D2, because they send out a bunch of astromechs, R2-D2 being one of them, out to the ship to like out into the space exterior of the ship to fix like a hole that was causing harshness to happen to like it was causing a lot of issues with the ship. So all the astromechs died except for R2-D2, who ends up fixing the thing and getting things back online for them. I think it was like a electrical thing or something. I can't remember. But there was some reason why they needed to go out there and fix that thing so the ship could then make a jump to light speed, which I don't think that the ship was able to fully make a very good or long one because, like I said earlier, the hyperdrive had gotten damaged and was now leaking fuel. So they decided to stop at a planet in the Outer Rim called Tatooine, which we all are familiar with from the first movie, which is where we met Luke Skywalker. And that is where Act 1 ends. And I would say Act 2 is this Tatooine section, but there's a little bit of an interlude before Act 2 begins. And I call this interlude The Slave. And the reason why I call it that way is because this interlude, I would say, is our sort of introduction into the dealings of what's happening and what the story going forward is going to need to be for Act 2. We meet our, like, one of our primary characters of the whole story, Anakin Skywalker. He's a little 9-year-old boy, and he's a little slave boy that works with works for a Toydarian workshop parts handler named Watto. And actually, I really like the creatures, a lot of the creatures that they came up with in Phantom Menace, and Toydarians are one of my favorite ones. I think they're really interesting. I have a fan fiction story that I've been working on with a Toydarian as like a Jabba the Hutt type of gangster mobster character, and this is supposed to be set like way in the future of Episode 9, like way past there. Maybe I can do a video on that at some point. There's quite a few things to talk about, though, with this second act. One of them being Anakin Skywalker and how Qui-Gon Jinn discovers him and believes him to be the chosen one. The rest of this is we learn that Anakin Skywalker is a slave. He's been a slave all of his life, and he's really good at fixing things. He's been building a droid that he calls C-3PO. So there's another famous character that we know that's been introduced to us now. So that's 3 of them: Obi-Wan Kenobi, C-3PO, and R2-D2. And actually, technically 4 if you count Anakin Skywalker, because Anakin Skywalker, as we know, grows up to be Darth Vader. So that's 4 of our original trilogy characters that we've been introduced to at this point. And so we get introduced to his mom, we get introduced to his home life, and we find out that he has a very good relationship with his mom, that he loves her very much, and that he's a very smart and intelligent kid. We get the idea that it's not going to be easy to come across someone willing to sell a hyperdrive to Qui-Gon and his people because of the fact that he only can use Republic credits, and apparently those aren't any good out here. So he has to make a deal with Watto. And this is an idea that Anakin actually comes up with. Anakin says, what if you had me race my pod? You can pass it off as yours, and you can make a bet with Watto that if I win the pod race, then he gives you the hyperdrive parts. And you can make a bet with Watto, basically offering, I will race a pod to win you the parts and whatnot. And so what Qui-Gon Jinn does, he makes the bet. I will give you my starship and my pod if Anakin loses. But if he wins, then you have to free him and his mother, and you have to give me my hyperdrive that I need for my starship. Watto does not agree to both Anakin and mother, so they roll a chance cube. And blue is the boy, red's the mother. Qui-Gon Jinn manipulates the dice through the Force to make it so that the dice lands on blue, so that when Anakin wins, Anakin is free instead of his mother. So things start to play through. The pod race happens. Anakin wins by the skin of his teeth and is freed. Watto is shamed, had a lot of money on this race, and loses out a lot. And then Anakin has to basically leave his mom. And this is where the first kind of part of his fall to the dark side sort of begins, is where he has to leave his mom, because that's the strongest connection that he has right now, and that plays in more in the second film, and we'll get there when we get to Attack of the Clones. And this is basically Qui-Gon takes Anakin back to the ship. They replace the hyperdrive, and on the way back, they are introduced to the villain of this first film, which is Darth Maul. He is on a hunt to try and kill the Jedis, and prevent them from, and capture the Queen and prevent them. And he's on the orders of someone named Darth Sidious, who the Federation are working for. So Qui-Gon Jinn has a little lightsaber duel. This is, I think, like the third, maybe fourth lightsaber duel overall in the movie. And Qui-Gon Jinn and Darth Maul share a little quick lightsaber duel. And then the ship escapes, and we now make it to the second interlude. But before we get there, I would like to discuss the second change that I would probably make to this movie, and that being change Anakin from being a 9-year-old to being a 15-year-old, and have Hayden Christensen or whoever you cast as Anakin to play him through the entire trilogy. And the reason I would do that is for a few reasons. One, the fact that he meets Padme here, they aren't able to really start developing the romance yet, because it's like a 14-year-old and a 9-year-old, makes it like a weird babysitter falling in love with their child that they're babysitting, or babies that falls in love with their babysitter kind of romance kind of a thing. And so if you have them being 14 and 15 and their romance is like a teen love thing, you can then start their romance starting right away, kind of like maybe even like a creepy thing from his, not creepy, but like a thing from it was only from his standpoint at first and not hers, or even vice versa, where it was for her standpoint at first and not his. And that he had no interest in her right away. Maybe you could even make him a little bit of like a bad boy, rebellious teenager person that his mom didn't let him pod race in the beginning, and he kind of rebelled against her to do it. And Qui-Gon Jinn letting him do that, and you can kind of see a little bit of the dark side edge to him in that, by making him a little older and having his slave life having gotten to him a little bit more at this point in his life. And then another thing that does is it makes him closer in age with Obi-Wan, so that when Obi-Wan starts training him later on, there's more of a closer age gap, so that Anakin doesn't respect Obi-Wan as much as he would have as being trained as a 9-year-old, and it adds more weight to when Yoda says he is too old in the interlude. And then I just think in general, being able to keep the same actor for our main character, or who's supposed to be our main character for the entire trilogy, would be better. Okay, so now getting into the interlude, the second interlude, I called this the Chosen One. And I call this the Chosen One because this is really where we start to learn about the prophecy and the Chosen One and everything, and Anakin gets tested to see if he can train in the Force, and he's denied that. He's denied that because Yoda says that he's too old. And like I said, going back to making him a 15-year-old instead of a 9-year-old, I feel like that adds weight to him being too old, because it seems weird that a 9-year-old couldn't start training and then be because he's only 9 years old. He's got a lot of life ahead of him before Revenge of the Sith happens, to where that's his life now. But as a 15-year-old, when he's got 15 years behind him and only 8 in front of him before he turns into Darth Vader, it makes more of a sense to why he could have a distrust and not full faith into this new group of people that's going to quickly become his family. Another thing that's happening at the same point is that Padme is trying to reason with the Senate to try to get them to come help her people, and they don't help her. They don't help her. And so one thing that Senator Palpatine, who is also from Naboo, and we find out something about him later on in Revenge of the Sith, although it's pretty obvious, I think, in this first film. But he convinces Padme to try to move for a vote of no confidence in the current Chancellor Valorum, which allows Palpatine to be able to wiggle his way in as the new Chancellor. But she decides that the Senate is getting them nowhere, and so she, based upon words that Jar Jar Binks has given to her, we have a grand army. And again, this is, like I said earlier, what I could have said, how Jar Jar Binks' character could have been better by being some sort of lost prince like Aragorn, or a mix between Aragorn and Robin Hood's kind of a character, is that he could have said to to her, look, I am the prince of the people who are against you right now down in Otagongo, and I think that we have a chance to save our people if we work together. I can lend you my army, but we have to go basically get my throne back. And that scene where they go beg Boss Nass for help could essentially instead be a small dethroning scene where Jar Jar Binks takes his throne back and becomes king of the Gungans again, and then is the general in the Grand Army, and then takes his army and fights against the droids. And then this is where we have Act 3, the Battle of Naboo, right? So in the Battle of Naboo, you have, I think it's 4 things are happening right now. You have on the Naboo plains a battle between the Gungans and the droid army. And then up in space, you have some of the Naboo Theed City Palace starfighters taking some starfighters up and trying to take out the Federation blockade ship. And then inside the palace, you have 2 fights going on. You have Padme and her people kind of trying to get to the throne room so they can deal with Newt Gunray and his people. And then you have Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon doing a lightsaber duel with Darth Maul. And for one, I think that I love it whenever the Star Wars movies do this kind of a thing where there's like 5 things happening at the end. They do it in Return of the Jedi, they do it in The Rise of Skywalker, they do it in The Force Awakens. And so this whole final battle sequence is amazing. I think all the action and all the fighting in it is amazing. The Duel of Fates music is incredible. With the exception of Jar Jar Binks' stupid jokes, I think that this is otherwise, and some of those stupid words that, like, this is pod racing that Anakin has. This is, in my opinion, an otherwise nearly flawless third act to a film. I think everything that's come before in this movie has led to this point and is pretty freaking incredible. And I think that when you really piece this movie together, it's actually a really very well written movie that has a couple of very major flaws that cause it to be a problem. But this final battle basically comes to an end. Anakin accidentally destroys the blockade Federation ship, which causes the droid army down on the ground to stop functioning, and the princess arrests Newt Gunray, and then we get to the meat of it, the lightsaber duel between Darth Maul, Obi-Wan, and Qui-Gon Jinn. So there comes a point in time where Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan and Darth Maul are all separated by these red beams. So the red beams switch off and allow them all to kind of try to convene together, but Obi-Wan's not fast enough and he gets cut off from the other 2. So Qui-Gon Jinn and Qui-Gon Jinn and Darth Maul have a fight by themselves for a second. What happens is this leads to Qui-Gon Jinn being killed by Darth Maul. Then once the beams turn themselves off again, Obi-Wan is able to have a final duel, a final face-off with Darth Maul, which leads to him slicing Darth Maul's double-bladed lightsaber in half, and then Maul shoves him off there's like a little hole in the middle of their battlefield. And so Obi-Wan is hanging there for dear life. And a lot of people joke that this is where Obi-Wan basically learned the tactic of the high ground, because right here Darth Maul has the high ground on him. And then Obi-Wan uses the Force to flip over Darth Maul, grab Qui-Gon Jinn's lightsaber, and slice Darth Maul in half. And then Darth Maul falls through the hole. And this right here is what I would say is my third and final major fix that I would make to this movie. But before I get into that, I want to talk about why the high ground thing. Because in Revenge of the Sith, there's that part where Anakin jumps over Obi-Wan, and he's like, "Don't do it, I have the high ground." And the reason why people suggest that this movie sort of hints at that is because Obi-Wan was able to achieve that because it was something that was never done before. And now that he was the one that did it, when Anakin tries to do it, Obi-Wan's smart to know that what Anakin's trying. And so he's able to do what Darth Maul couldn't and make a counterattack. But basically, the change that I would make at the end of this film is I would not have Darth Maul die. The reason I would not have Darth Maul die is because I think that actually playing off of the whole Darth Maul and Obi-Wan rivalry, and have Darth Maul be kind of the symbolic leader slash visual for the Clone War that's going to be occurring over the course of the next couple of films. Then you don't have to necessarily shoehorn a character like Grievous in there, or even Dooku for that matter, necessarily. You can keep it as just Darth Maul and Darth Sidious as like the villains throughout the trilogy, and you can give it more of that way the original trilogy felt, how Darth Vader was that like consistent conflict, all three, whereas in the prequel trilogy it seems like there's a new conflict in every new movie, and it doesn't feel like it's very cohesive from one thing to the next. It feels like Phantom Menace set up a very specific story that kind of got changed in Attack of the Clones a little bit, and what the story that we should have gotten from the prequel trilogy was the story that was supposed to be being told between Revenge of the Sith and Attack of the Clones. There should have been a movie in between. But I really love Phantom Menace, and what I would do instead is I would just change some things about Phantom Menace so that it holds out a little bit better with the other two, and change some of the things that the other two based upon the differences that happen in Phantom Menace. But basically, the way the Act 3 ends is that Qui-Gon Jinn makes Obi-Wan promise to train Anakin, and he says, he is the chosen one. He will bring balance to the Force. You must promise me that you'll train him. And Obi-Wan makes that promise. And then we get to the final portion of the movie, the epilogue, which I call the Master or the Apprentice. Basically, what happens is Obi-Wan goes to Yoda and he says, regardless of whether or not the Council allows this, I'm going to train Anakin because I made a promise to Qui-Gon and I'm not going to break that promise. And the Council decides to allow Anakin's training. And then they have a little funeral pyre for Qui-Gon Jinn. And what I find interesting is that the last time we saw a funeral pyre was for Darth Vader in Return of the Jedi, right? And usually what we had seen from the Jedi in the original trilogy was that they would just disappear. But Qui-Gon Jinn is not disappearing right here. And that's because they haven't discovered that ability yet. And they get into that as the trilogy goes on. But a conversation that happens between Mace Windu and Yoda during the funeral is that they discuss Darth Maul and the return of the Sith. Because the Sith have been, extinct for like something like over 1,000 years at this point in the movies. And Mace Windu says, or Yoda says, always two there are, no more, no less, a master and an apprentice. And Mace Windu says to him, but which one was killed, the master or the apprentice? And then it pans over to Palpatine, and it kind of zooms in on it, the side of his face a little bit. This is kind of why I feel like The Phantom Menace is a very appropriate title, because if you know the story, you know that Palpatine ends up being revealed to be the Phantom Menace. He is this Darth Sidious, who is an enemy that's been there in the shadows. He's the master. Darth Maul was the apprentice, and Darth Sidious was that Phantom Menace that has been following the Jedi and the Republic and everything during this whole trilogy. And he gets revealed to be that Phantom Menace in Revenge of the Sith, and we'll get there when we get there. But for now, I hope that you enjoyed my review and recap of The Phantom Menace. Just to sort of conclude, basically, I love this movie. I think it's really good. I think it's got a solid storyline. I think it's got actually a pretty well-written storyline. I think there are a few things that if they were changed, Anakin not being 9 years old, Jar Jar Binks not being a buffoon, and Darth Maul not dying, that this would have made it an even better film. And I think that on the whole, those things are, with the exception of probably Jar Jar Binks, I think that those things are very minor issues that even without changing those things, you still have what I would consider to be a 4-star film, in my opinion. Feel free to comment below with a disagreement, with an alternate opinion. I'm aware fully that having this high of a regard of the movie Phantom Menace is an unpopular opinion. So feel free to comment below and share your opinions and your thoughts. And if you disagreed or agreed with me, if you felt I missed anything, feel free to add that. And next time we will tackle Attack of the Clones, and you will understand why I think that is probably one of the worst Star Wars films, although I think it has a lot of redeeming qualities as well. Please like and subscribe, and thank you for watching my video. This is Squirrel Master Kenobi. I'll see you next time. May the Force be with you.